Welcome to the Sandwich Generation podcast, a resource for adults balancing the dual responsibilities of raising children and caring for aging parents. Whether you're helping your parents downsize, explore real estate options, navigating caregiving, or looking for practical advice to help your family thrive, this is the place for you. Join us as we bring you expert insights, heartfelt stories, and actionable items to support you and your family within this unique generation. We have Jessie, is it Hillock or Hillock? How do you like to say your last name?
Yeah, Hillock.
Yep. Okay. Hillock. She is a dementia navigation coach and consultant and a certified dementia practitioner with a background as a speech language speech language pathologist. Get that all out there. So welcome. Please just introduce yourself a little bit, Jessie, and tell us about the Memory Compass, a little bit about what inspired you to start the Memory Compass.
Okay, well, thank you, ladies. So I started the Memory Compass, like you had mentioned. I have a background as a speech language pathologist, and a lot of people think of an SLP working maybe with children, or
Sure.
maybe somebody had a stroke and they're relearning how to communicate. That type of therapy was never what I was interested in or drawn to. I was drawn to the executive function decline that takes place with neurodegenerative disorders. So Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's, and all the various dementias. So I worked in skilled nursing for about 6 years. And in that time, I was doing over 1,000 cognitive assessments to try to stage individuals within the disease progression, help families understand what stage their loved one was in. Maybe they went to skilled nursing because they were there for rehab to home and they didn't have any formal diagnosis, but after being hospitalized, it exacerbated and sent forward cognitive changes that were likely always there, but it was like the gun, that made these changes come out. And I was doing a lot of tough conversations with families about, your loved one may no longer be safe to go home, or maybe they were in independent living and it was time to transition to assisted. But in that skilled nursing environment, I really was kind of seeing families when they were more of in a crisis situation, where maybe they had a diagnosis for a long time. And they really, from what I understood, was they would receive the diagnosis, receive medication, and that's really it. They're just kind of will see you back in 4 to 6 months. So I had this idea that I wanted to take all the knowledge that I had about executive function decline and help families understand how to support their loved one before maybe even needing to move, before maybe even needing an increased level of care. So I started the Memory Compass, and in the past 6 years that I have been in business, I have supported over 200 families, whether that be whether that be here in Indiana or virtually across the US. But sort of where it started was I was just coaching families on how to communicate with their loved one. And it's really evolved over time into not only how to communicate with their loved one, like, resistance to things, like you'll often, they don't want to take a shower, or, they don't think that there's anything cognitively going on with them, to how to set up their environment for safety. And then it kind of evolved into, well, I also want to help the care partner on their mental well-being as well. So it's really become a holistic, whole view approach of not just the loved one, but really much focused on the family, which I really think are the hidden patient in the situation.
Sure. Oh, that's a good way to put it. The hidden patient.
The hidden patient. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I did not know your background was so interesting. I mean, I knew you were interesting and when we presented together a while back, but that's really cool. I have one question, like a follow-up question to that. So when you were doing your speech pathology, like what made you go that route? Probably when a lot of people were going the other way that you were talking about with children.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Like when we think of dementia, immediately we think of memory loss. That's usually like the first thing people think of. And I think we have this really misconception that people who aren't in it, like don't have family or friends that are affected by it. They just think, oh, so-and-so can't remember the day of the week, or they don't know somebody's name.
Right.
But I was really drawn to frontal lobe, kind of what happens when our frontal lobe starts to have cognitive decline. And really with dementia, it's not just the memory loss, it's those executive function skills that are housed in the frontal lobe of our brain.
Sure.
So, I just always was really fascinated with that. So executive function is, changes in problem solving, following directions,
Right.
sequencing, attention, concentration, changes in mood and behavior, changes in judgment and safety awareness, sense of self. All of those things are really what families struggling with. And communication is not just obviously the words that we say, like expressive communication, but when somebody's demonstrating that cognitive decline, there's a breakdown in all those things that I just mentioned with their communication. So I was just fascinated and drawn to learning how we're not going to be able to train the individual how to relearn to communicate with their disease, but how can we train caregivers and adapt our own communication and adapt the environment to meet those executive function decline changes that are taking place. So that's kind of really what I was drawn to. So oftentimes, like in a skilled nursing facility that I worked in, we would hear, oh, a patient's having a behavior. Well,
Right.
to me, a behavior is really communication. It's
Sure.
an unmet need that's taking place. So that was kind of my scope, and then I was analyzing what was that breakdown and how do I train caregivers how to adapt and meet their loved one where they are or meet their patient where they are.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah, but wow, that's all.
We're both like, wow, we need a PowerPoint. We need all of those cognitive functions on a PowerPoint. I'm sure you have it. We're going to find your marketing on LinkedIn and share it,
Yeah.
of course.
Yes, we will.
Because I was saying wow, and maybe Sara, you were saying wow for another reason, but the you mentioned scope. I mean, the amount of work that there is probably to do in this area is just astronomical, and you're just one person.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking back to, my background. I worked in a senior community for a lot of years. And the first time I specifically remember realizing that dementia was not just memory loss was a very young resident that had come to live with us. She was not even in her 50s. And she was still driving. Family hadn't really noticed that there was a lot going on with her until someone went to her house and saw the stacks of mail and food, expired food, meal, like prep, things that should be kept in the refrigerator were not being kept in the refrigerator, things like that. So hearing you say that about like the safety and just making those decisions that we don't even think about in our regular day, right? Those are some of the things that I think people aren't even aware that they should be watching for and looking for, because we're just thinking about the memory part.
Right.
Of that
the other thing,
so it's good to hear you say that.
But something that I also noticed that with a lot of my clients is that when we first start working together, usually those things that you just mentioned have been going on for a few years before they ever, go to the doctor. And a lot of times what I find, and it's just natural as humans, like we compensate for those we love too. So we start doing things like meal delivery or, oh, you don't need to, handle your finances anymore. I'll take it over for you. Or, I can get your meds for you. Just things like that. That again, people just assume, oh, those changes I'm seeing might just be normal aging. And then also when their loved one just goes to see their PCP and they have that general like Medicare wellness visit, they're asking questions that are really not challenging. It is, what day of the week is it? What month is it? Are you having any problems? Well, everybody's going to say, no, I'm fine. Because they're, they think they are, because of those executive function changes are taking place. They are not even aware that those are happening to them. So it's tricky because we put a lot of weight as family members of, oh, well, my loved one's doctor said that they were fine, so everything must be fine. So we kind of go along with that and hope that that's true, even though we have this gut feeling of some of the things that I'm seeing.
Something's off.
Yeah.
That made me think of the analogy of like the frog in the boiling pot of water. It just slowly accumulates, and then before you know it, you've got a boiled frog. So these cognitive functions sort of decline slowly. We have family members compensating for one another. And then before you know it, we've got a major problem on our hands.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So what are, our focus is the adult child. And so if they're starting to maybe suspect that there could be some cognitive decline, what are some of the things that they should maybe be looking for, watching for, questions they should maybe ask?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so challenging because you're in this role of adult child, and then you're going into this territory that's just very uncomfortable of, my parent is demonstrating these changes and I don't know if I should say anything or if I shouldn't. But unfortunately, a lot of the caregiving is put on the sandwich generation. And if they're not doing anything about it, even more so than some of the spouses. So maybe one spouse is cognitively fine, but the other spouse is not. But that one spouse is right in it 24/7 and they're compensating. They don't see everything. They don't think that is as big of a issue as it is. So I always share with, the adult children, don't just kind of sit on that line of fine, because that's where we all kind of sit. It's like, okay, we're on this line of fine and eventually something might happen, but everything's okay now. I'm a big believer in just being proactive, and oftentimes a lot of the clients that I work with, like, unfortunately, I love healthcare. Like, I love the doctors, but they aren't really providing families with direction. They're either, some of the people are falling through the cracks on the screenings, so they're told that they're fine when they're not. Or sometimes, it's just, like I said, here's this diagnosis, here's this medication, I'll see you back in 4 to 6 months. And even with that diagnosis, families still don't have any direction whatsoever. So as family members, if you are suspecting that your loved one's demonstrating these characteristics, something that is always kind of painful for me to hear is that, we'll seek help once we receive the diagnosis. Well, that diagnosis.
I've heard that a lot too.
Yeah. And that diagnosis might not be received for 6 months to a year, depending on sometimes even longer from what I'm hearing right now. I've had some people on a wait list for 18 months. So what are you going to do in that in between? There's still this cognitive decline challenge. So I wouldn't wait for the doctor. I would look out for, all the different resources that you think you might need, which people aren't aware of what they don't know, right? But, seeking out education like this, listening to podcasts, researching, working with dementia coaches and consultants, even if your loved one doesn't yet have a formal diagnosis, looking at some of those scales that are out there, which is called a global deterioration scale. And it's like a dementia staging scale. It's free. It's online. If you just Google global deterioration scale, it's a PDF that comes up. I don't ever like to fit anyone into a box. It's not one size fits all by any means, but it's a scale that goes from, 1 as if there's no cognitive decline at all to a 7, which would be severe cognitive decline. Those characteristics on there and see where their loved one, like, I like to tell people to highlight like characteristics that they're seeing, and you're usually going to see a lot in one specific box. And then, okay, well, this really is something we need to start looking at. What is the next level of care potentially that they need to research as family members because their loved one's never going to do that. Another really good tool that I like families to use is, family dynamics. A lot of people are on a different page. You have some that think that's just normal aging. You have others that have that gut feeling that
right.
There's another screening tool, and it's called the A as in apple, D as in dog, 8, the number 8, AD8.
AD8.
AD8. It's also a free dementia screening tool, but it's a unique one because a lot of the screening tools out there are for the individual themselves. But this is I think it's 8 questions. Yeah, 88 is why it's 8. It's 8 questions, and it's specifically for the caregiver or the adult children. So if you answer yes to 2 or more of those 8 questions, then that is red flags, raises concern. So that can be a really good starting point for families when they're just kind of wondering. And again, that's a free tool. It's just 88. You can Google that and find that online.
When they start seeing some odd behaviors from their loved ones, from their parents or whatever. You have a wealth of information. I just love it. And I love that we're having you on this podcast because you're right. We don't know what we don't know. So adult children are out here. And also, by the way, you knew what the sandwich generation was because you used it as you were talking.
Yes.
But so adult children a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
I think Gen Xers do. We do. But they're out here raising their families, working full-time jobs, just trying to hold all that together. And then this whole component of their parents aging and having health issues comes into play. And you're right, walking on that line of fine kind of thing. And then an emergency happens, and then it's like we haven't planned. So, or we're waiting on that doctor's diagnosis. So these tools that you've mentioned, and we'll add these to when we post the podcast and we do marketing. We'll certainly add these resources, but it lets the caregiver put the symptoms in a category while they're waiting on that diagnosis. And like you said, everybody's different. Everybody's journey is different, but we like labels in our society, and so it sort of helps, it helps that caregiver figure out what's going on. And it sounds like maybe there are some other resources based on what level they're at with those, the evaluations that you've mentioned, the 88 and the other one.
So it's called a global deterioration scale. It's GDS. Okay. Yeah. And it's been around forever. And again, it's not a one size fits all. Like even, just with our executive function skills, like if we didn't sleep well that night before, or if we weren't hydrated, or, if we were overstimulated, maybe one part of the day, especially with dementia, they could wake up and be in one category, and then, 2 hours later, they could be in another. And then as the day goes on, they could be in another. But that's really true for all of us when we're overstimulated or,
absolutely.
So I don't like to say that somebody is a specific, stage within there, but it can be really helpful to just, because typically if somebody is, I said it's a 7-point scale, typically if somebody's in a level 3, that's considered mild cognitive impairment. But if somebody's in a level 4, that's considered early stage dementia. And when they're in that level 4, that typically either means that they need some sort of care in the home or somebody checking on them, like they need in-home companion care of some sort, or they need family that is there, or it may be time to make a transition of care. So that tool can be helpful because it kind of gives that, I don't necessarily know if validation is the word, but to family of, okay, we really do need to start these conversations, and nobody's going to start conversations for us. It's going to be us to start them.
That waiting for a, go ahead.
I was going to say, I also feel like it would be helpful to, if you are waiting for that doctor's appointment and it's 6 months away, if you have those tools at your, you can do, and then take that information with you to that doctor's appointment as well. Be like, I've already started my own research. This is what I found. Like anything that you can help provide to the physician, I think is we only have this small amount of time. So anything that you can help give them is beneficial.
That's actually a really good point, because then they know they're working with an educated caregiver or an educated patient. And I feel like personally, you get a different care. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that out loud, but I mean, doctors will approach you differently if they know that you're educated and you are advocating for your own health journey, or you have, an adult child there advocating for you.
Yeah. So sometimes we have to be a little tricky in the way that we use our words to get our loved one to go to an appointment. Sometimes, like primary care is a great start, but I love geriatricians. So geriatricians are physicians that are specialized in aging. So they're specialized in 65 and older. So they are more familiar with, people who are on multiple medications. A lot of times as we age, we're on multiple. They're just more specialized in the aging body. And so sometimes, when we're coaching through how to get somebody to go, it's, mom or dad, like I found this doctor and, they specialize in this. Wouldn't it be so much better to go see somebody who specializes in aging or specializes in knowing, multiple medications that are taken? And so sometimes that's a way to get somebody to go in. And I always encourage the sandwich generation caregiver to go with their loved one, obviously. But yes, taking that information and even handing it to the nurse's station at the front when you're checking in, kind of slide whatever, like a bullet point list of things that you're noticing so that the doctor has it ahead of time, and that they can start bringing up things in the appointment versus you're the one sitting there next to your loved one.
Yes.
That's so smart. That is such a great piece of advice.
So many nuggets there. The specialty thing, you're right. I mean, I think about my dad, and he talks about his primary care physician, and it's exactly what we're doing with Indy Real Estate Experts. We're specializing in seniors real estate, opposed to being a generalist when it comes to real estate. So we see similar things when we're talking about helping a client downsize. So we're able to make adjustments and ask specific questions based on what we've seen in our experience with working with downsizers. So it's the same concept with a gerontologist. Is that the right
geriatrician?
term?
Yeah. So gerontologist. Yeah. Gerontology is the study of aging, essentially. So the geriatrician is the specialist.
Like a pediatrician, but a geriatrician. Yeah. Perfect.
Great. So, how do you suggest if someone is, like you said, they're just sitting in that appointment, and rather than them being the one that's bringing these things up, having the doctor do it, how do you kind of advise families on guiding their parent into these appointments without feeling like they're taking away their independence or their that they know best, that kind of thing? Like, you have any tips on how to best handle that?
Yeah. So one thing I think it's important for families to know is that a lot of times that they will say that their loved one is in denial of their deficits. Like, my loved one's in denial that they shouldn't be living by themselves anymore, or they're in denial that they, are still able to take their medications, or that they can still drive, or that they don't need any care. But that's not actually what's happening. Denial is when we know that we should make a change and we choose not to. But what's actually happening when somebody has cognitive decline is, it's a fancy term, anosognosia. And it's a big word, but basically it's that changes are taking place in the brain, and that somebody is not able to see that these changes are taking place, or that they should do X, Y, and Z because of that cognitive deficit. So a lot of times we want our loved one to agree with us. Like, we want people to agree. And so we think we're going to sit them down and have this intervention, and it's going to be all the family. And we're going to say, Mom, Dad, like, you really shouldn't live by yourself anymore, and here are all the reasons why. That just backfires because the person does not have the ability to see that any of those cognitive changes are taking place. If they do, usually they have one foot in and one foot out, really. They're kind of on that line of seeing the cognitive change and not, but you're still not ever going to get them to agree with you. The way to have that conversation is to approach it more in a way of, positive. So don't give them all the negative things. Instead, say, like, we have found a place that, they'll do medications. They have activities. There's all these amenities and benefits if, that's the route. Or if they're getting care into the home, then, the other is, we have heard great things about this company. They've helped a family member. Like, this would be so amazing to have all of this support. These are all the things that they can do, but don't ever give them all the negative and reasons why they shouldn't do X, Y, and Z, because they might agree with you. Usually what I hear families say, well, they agreed with me. We're in, we've got it. 2 days later, they're right back to where they were before.
Yeah.
And this constant argument. But with that independence piece that you said, I don't ever like to think of it as, this is what I coach my clients with, like, it's not that you're taking somebody's independence away. It's that you are making decisions out of love because your love brain is unable to make that safe choice. And if roles were reversed, like when you were younger and you were learning and your executive functions were developing, your family member was helping guide and model you. So you're not doing it to strip away independence. You're wanting to do these things so that your loved one can continue to live as vibrant of a life as possible. If we don't do anything, then what does that look like later on down the road? It will look worse than what it looks like right now.
Yeah.
I love that perspective. It made me think of the compliment sandwich. So instead of saying all the negatives, we say something positive. We put something in there that, could be construed as negative, and then we follow up with something positive again.
Yes.
So we can kind of do a compliment sandwich when we're trying to have those conversations. And just the perspective that you gave, like when you think of a 2-year-old putting something in their mouth, well, we're not going to get mad at them because they're learning and they're developing those cognitive functions. And so switching our perspectives with our older loved ones to that, I think could make our approach so much gentler, kinder, and probably less stressful overall for everyone involved, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that stress and that guilt. And that's, again, just as humans, like, we want to be right and we want people to agree with us. But in this situation, that's likely not going to happen. So it's, how do you shift your mindset that, my loved one's not going to see everything that I see, but I'm going to be okay with that and know that I am making these decisions, again, like I said, out of love, so that my loved one can live as vibrant as possible.
I like that shift. That's good. So many nuggets, Jessie. We might have to do a part 2 sometime.
I love it.
For sure.
I'm looking through our questions here. We threw them in our chat so we wouldn't forget. Do you have any that you're just wanting to ask, Sara?
I was so if families are not on the same page, where, maybe one's recognizing that there's some things happening and then the other's just I don't even see what you're talking about, or maybe they're just not as present in that their loved ones' lives, like maybe they live further away, that kind of thing. Are there ways that families can kind of have those conversations and figure out how they can get on the same page, or things that you suggest they share with the loved one that, their sibling or whoever that doesn't see these things happening?
Yeah. So I strongly encourage families to have a sit-down meeting together without their loved one present. If it's just multiple adult children, or the spouses are involved too, sitting down and talking about, everybody's good at something and everybody's not so great at other things. So
Right.
some of my families, one person might be doing more of the financial piece. Another person might be coordinating, in-home care coming in and coming up with that schedule. Another might be doing, meal delivery, and another might be making sure, like maybe their loved one has like an Amazon Echo Show at home where they pop up on the screen, and every so often, at this time, this day, they're going to make sure that they call their loved one, because just that's what they can do from afar. But I like families to sit down and create like a Google spreadsheet or like a sheet or like an Excel sheet, and delegate those tasks. Sit down and talk about, like, for the year, if you are planning on coming in to visit, because that can usually be a thing, like who's kind of rotating, checking in on mom or dad.
Right.
Have that whole calendar set for the year. Know when someone's coming in. If someone's doing meal delivery, then that's the one person that's doing it. But having all that kind of information consolidated, so they're not just kind of in limbo guessing, oh, did you do this? Did you check in? Did you do this? It's all kind of in one place.
I like that. So everybody can see it. If it's on a Google Drive and you share it with all the siblings. I had 2 siblings say, my sister is the maker and I'm the taker. So my sister makes the appointments and puts them on the calendar, and I take my mom to, whatever. I thought that was good. So they established roles there. I'm sorry, my cats are having a party over here. If you hear that, they established roles like what you're saying, and they were clear. Each person knew what the other was doing.
Right.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that.
The Echo
I'm probably
Show.
asking the same question. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. You mentioned like maybe somebody pops up on the Echo Show and can like have a eyes on kind of thing. What are some of the things that technology can be helpful with, like things that families can maybe utilize or bring into the home? I'm sure there's a ton, but
there's so many things. So two things that I love. One, there's a product that's called Jubilee TV. And Jubilee TV, you've seen that. So basically, remote controls become a problem. We have like 2 remotes or 3 remotes sometimes for a TV. Getting the channel on that we want can usually be an issue because we start to have that cognitive decline. We're getting confused. So there's an app that a caregiver can actually make sure whatever show is on, no matter where their loved one lives, is on at a certain time for them. So making sure that certain shows are up. But then also there's a camera feature where they can pop up on the entire TV screen and do essentially like a FaceTime call. So that's really cool. It also has motion detection. So you can see like if somebody fell in the living room, like it's only going to detect it right in that area.
Right.
So it's a really great tool, especially for those that get, the TV mixed up so many times. There's another thing that I love, and it's called a RAS phone, RAZ. And a RAS phone it essentially looks like an iPhone, but it on the screen only has the ability for placing calls, outgoing and incoming calls. And it has no text messaging, no email. It's literally just for making those calls. But the buttons are like circles that have the person's face in them.
Oh,
and they're enlarged, like they're very large. So that can be really helpful because the cell phone, unfortunately, really becomes an issue. But if that's not something that you want to introduce because you're worried about the text messaging, and that also, but that also has an app as well where the caregiver can block calls. So no robocalls, but they can also block out outgoing calls. So if your loved one's calling you 30 times in the middle of the night, it's not going to go to you.
Stop calling. Yeah. Right.
So it has that feature. But another thing, like I was going to say, if, you still want your loved one to text, you still want them to do email, there is a setting on the iPhone under accessibility mode that you can change it for cognition. So if you go to your settings and you go into accessibility mode, there's a cognitive feature that you can click and it will eliminate unnecessary apps. It will enlarge the different icons. And it has some features specifically for cognitive decline as well. So that's a cool thing that not a lot of people know about.
Sure.
Goodness.
And for Android users, Android has accessibility features as well, if you're an Android person like myself.
See, good to know.
I just like to give her a hard time about it. That's funny.
What kind of one food for thought or one takeaway from all of this? I mean, you've shared so much information, and I do think we could have a part 2 and you'd have even more nuggets to give us. But if we had one thing that we could pass on to listeners or viewers, what would that thing be from you?
I think it's just that we just live in such a reactive world, a reactive healthcare system. And unfortunately, with this disease, with cognitive decline, usually when we're waiting, we're waiting too long. We're waiting too long to get any type of support put in place. We're waiting too long to have challenging conversations. So then we end up in crisis. And I don't ever want anyone to be in crisis. It's not where we should be. So knowledge is power, and proactivity is power. And I just really encourage families to, if you have that gut feeling, start working towards educating yourself about, what's available, what you should start doing for your loved one. Because if we just wait, it's just worse on everyone. And this is generational. So it's not just bad for you. Your kids are impacted that you're raising at home. It's really being proactive.
If we had $1 for everyone that expressed that sentiment when we asked them for the one thing, I mean, we'd be able to retire early. I think the reason why people say don't wait, plan early, well, there's multiple reasons, but when we are making plans, when there's been an emergency, we are making plans emotionally. We're making decisions out of emotion. Our choices are narrowed at that point. When there has been an emergency, we have less choices, less options. And so planning early and planning often, revisiting those plans gives us more control. For all the control freaks out there, we've got more control, we've got more options. And when and if an emergency does happen, we're not making emotional decisions. We've already made the decisions when we were at a stable emotional state, when we weren't in an emergency. So, I think everyone we talk to says the same thing. Something to it. So
the Memory Compass, I know people can go to thememorycompass.com to find out more about you and your services, Jessie, but tell us just kind of quickly, like, what are some of the main services that you provide and work with families? And I know you mentioned you can kind of work with people no matter where they live. So locally, but then also what you can do for people that aren't necessarily local here to Central Indiana. So
so when I'm working with a family, it's just the adult children. Sometimes the spouse comes in and joins as well, but I work from Indiana and across the US, but I have families fill out an intake form that kind of pinpoints where their loved one is cognitively, so that I can kind of get an assessment of what kind of they should dive into right away to help them create an action plan, 3 to 5 main things. And then also we continue to set that foundation for what should be in place as the disease progresses as well. But I'm getting a holistic view of their loved one. And then I'm also asking them, where are you struggling? Your health,
their challenges,
your social connection, like what are the things that you're struggling with? So it's really dual. I'm not only giving all of my kind of that executive function education, but then also really making sure I'm coming alongside the family and helping provide them with direction. But it doesn't matter if somebody has a diagnosis or not. The reason really why I started this too is that my husband is a leukemia survivor. When he was diagnosed, he had a whole team. His family had a whole team. When you have dementia, there is nothing. There is no team. And there's no manual, there's no guidebook. And so that's really why I created this, is I want to be that guide for families. So whether they have the diagnosis or whether even I've started with families when their loved one is all the way progressed to hospice. And that's when we're first starting to work together. But I'm helping them have that clear path and coaching them through the guilt and coaching them through, setting boundaries and all of those things. So it's really, there's so much that I do, from educating on brain changes, strategizing through challenging care situations, recommending products, recommending how to have those tough conversations with siblings or, other family members, recommending, education on how to get care in the home, when it's time to have a transition of care, to then also, again, coming alongside that individual and coaching them through the guilt. So there's so many things that I do.
Jessie Hillock, dementia coach, educator, counselor, advocate, all the things, right? What does it look like for somebody who did want to engage your services? Do they just go to your website and fill out a form, or how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so on my website, there is a button to click to get started, and that takes you to setting up a discovery call. So I always like to meet with families either by phone or virtually for about 15 to 20 minutes to kind of learn about their needs. And then from there, I share the ways that I could help support them, and then we can make a decision on what that would look like. So I've had some families that I've been working with consistently for over the past 3 or more years, because it's always evolving, always changing. So each family is different on kind of what that frequency and duration and what the plan is.
So I have an entrepreneurial question, only because the space that we're into as a company, but also because of the number of people who could benefit from your services. What does your growth trajectory look like, or your plans? Do you have any plans to train more mini Jessies to help other people, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so at the current moment, it's hard to train somebody when a lot of my experience has been from my clinical background. So it's hard to train someone on that, but I am currently working on different courses. So if somebody is not working with me one-on-one, or if they are, one of them that I'm working on right now is kind of Care Companion 101. So you want to have a care companion come into the home. What are the activities that you should have them do for cognitive stimulation activities for their loved one that's appropriate based off of their stage? What do you want their daily schedule to look like? How do you look for a company? What questions should you be asking them? Personal, we call it reminisce therapy. So personal connection of questions that build rapport between the caregiver. And so that's one example. I have so many other things like that in the works, but trying to kind of create those things that families can use at any time if it's not just working one-on-one with me. And so many different, that's just one example of many.
Yes. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that's smart.
So people can be taking those classes asynchronously and getting the education that you provide, even if it's not, live or virtual with you directly. So that's awesome. Well, you'll have to keep us posted on that, and we'll help get the word out for sure.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Well, as always, please, go check out our guest for the day, but then also give our podcast some shares, likes, comments, follows, any of the feedback you can provide. We'd love for our listeners to share this with someone that you feel like might benefit from the information. And I think that's it for today. We will see you next week.
Thanks, Jessie.
Thank you
See you
so
guys.
much.